Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game SO. Today I got a fun and exciting video for you guys this evening because we're going to be talking about what the future is going to hold potentially and definitely for FPGA gaming in 2025 and moving forward. Because the Christmas gifts have been unwrapped, the New Year's Eve hangovers have subsided, and we're into a brand new year. And as exciting as 2024 was for FPGA gaming, I think we're going to see even bigger and better things in FPGA for 2025 and beyond. So we're going to talk about what I think is going to happen in the future. And of course, we're going to start it off with MiSTer FPGA. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But the big quote-unquote talk is the MiSTer 2 might be happening, might not be happening, will definitely be happening in the future. Obviously, the MiSTer FPGA project is the de facto leader in FPGA gaming, and I'm sure there's going to be a MiSTer 2 somewhere down the road once we kind of grow out of the MiSTer FPGA hardware and the Terasic DE10 Nano, which we're already pushing at the top ends of. Terasic recently announced the DE25 standard, which is using an Agilex 5 chip from Intel, and that is something that definitely could be useful for FPGA gaming moving forward. But do be aware that Agilex is a brand new platform, and it is still basically just starting to see use in some markets. So this is definitely bleeding edge technology, but it is generations removed from the Cyclone 5 you see on MiSTer FPGA and other FPGA gaming devices, and definitely would be a big step up as far as capabilities are concerned. And as far as what gets used on MiSTer FPGA, we use the DE10 Nano, so the DE25 standard and the DE10 standard are a little bit bigger and more fully featured than you would need for a MiSTer FPGA 2 project. So perhaps in the next 12 to 18 months, Terasic might announce the DE25 Nano, which would be a good candidate for becoming MiSTer 2. But obviously MiSTer still has legs. We have the Atari Jaguar core being worked on right now. We have PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64, and Sega Saturn cores, and a ton of different arcade cores as well. So it's not like MiSTer FPGA has been basically made obsolete by this chip. There is still so much fun to have on MiSTer, and I'm sure we're going to see more fun cores in the future. But of course, everyone wants to look into that crystal ball and think what could be coming next. And of course, the DE10 board in the middle of the triple stack definitely is getting long in the tooth. It's only going to do 1080p out unless you go into a 4K scaler. So there are some situations on MiSTer where we'd love to see some upgrades. But for me, it would be the possibility of expanded cores that the MiSTer FPGA can't handle. There's a lot of arcade boards out there like the Cave 1000B and D that use the Hitachi SH3 CPU versus the SH2 on Sega Saturn that probably wouldn't run on the MiSTer FPGA as we know it today. So that would be amazing to move up to the DE25 or some other Terasic board. But I want you to be aware this does not mean stuff like a PlayStation 2 core. That hardware is so incredibly complex and beyond what everything else we have on FPGA is right now. I don't want to get people's hopes up and you think that by 2026 you're going to be playing a PlayStation 2, GameCube, or Xbox core. You might though, however, be playing something like a Dreamcast core. That would be possible, I would assume, on the DE25 platform and the Agilex 5 series of chips. And there are people out there poking at the edges of Dreamcast, including Electron Ash, which has a couple screenshots of actually booting some games up in FPGA code. It is at the very infancy and it is just a test project right now, but it's one of those things that could be coming in the next 12 to 24 months. Now moving over to Taki Udon and Retro Replay MiSTer side of things, obviously we're going to be getting more MiSTer FPGA projects in 2025 that are going to be based on that DE10 Nano board and the Cyclone 5 chip. We already have the MiSTer Pi triple stack, and that has been performing exceptionally well for everybody, and I think in 2025 you're really going to see the user base grow. Now that you can get a full triple stack MiSTer for around $165, that price point and barrier to entry has been so much lowered compared to what it was before, over $400 for a good build. You can still totally go the Terasic DE10 Nano route and build that yourself. You can go the MiSTer Pi route, but it's great to have options and to make this thing more economical for more users, because trust me, the larger the user base, the more cores you're going to see in the future. And Taki Udon just recently announced that I talked about on the channel, I will leave a link in the description below, about the new PlayStation 1 inspired console. And he has an entire roadmap along with his company for different MiSTer based consoles, handhelds, and even what seems to be remade PVMs for MiSTer FPGA. So I think you're going to be seeing a lot of that in 2025 as well. These new products coming out that are based on MiSTer FPGA but kind of make the case design a little bit more attractive and make it more user friendly for people that don't want to build their own triple stack, and I'm excited about that. let's move over to Analogue for a little bit, because obviously they've got some irons in the fire for 2025 as well. As of the recording of this video, we do not have a ship date on the Analogue 3D, but this is their next standalone console, a full recreation of the Nintendo 64 in FPGA that reads cartridges. And the cartridge reading is one thing we can't do on the MiSTer FPGA side of things, but obviously we have a complete Nintendo 64 core that will play 100% of the retail library and a decent amount of ROM hacks as well. So it will be fun to see what Analogue does, but they have a completely different business model because they are in fact a business, not a project like MiSTer FPGA is. They exist to sell consoles. I don't think you're going to see that master, a plays everything console come from Analogue until they get through the PlayStation 1, the Sega Saturn, as well as the Nintendo 64, because their business model is predicated on selling FPGA recreation consoles. So if they made one console that played all of their cores, they really would be kind of end-of-lifing their own business model. And it would be slightly scary to be Analogue as well, because there's only so many consoles out there you can recreate. You will end up doing all of them, and then you wonder what they're going to make next. Well, what I hope they make next is an Analogue Pocket 2. While the Analogue Pocket is an amazing device, it also feels like it's getting a little bit old at this point in time, both in the form factor as well as the cores it can support. You're not going to see Sega Saturn on something like the Analogue Pocket. You're not going to see Nintendo 64 on the Analogue Pocket. You're not going to see PlayStation 1 either. It has a much smaller FPGA chip, and while it can do a lot and does bring a lot to the table, it can be slightly limiting, and honestly, I really want to see a refresh for the form factor alone. I'm not saying they need to make it the same shape as the Ambernic R-Cubed, but it is one of those things. Give me an Analogue Pocket 2 with 2 analog sticks in a horizontal form factor, and I'd be having a lot of fun and we'll be right back into the buying line trying to pick one up. So I do think maybe this year or early next year, you might see Analogue come out with a revamped Analogue Pocket with a bigger FPGA chip, as well as the capability to run more of the cores that already exist. I would definitely be down for that, but leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think Analogue should do with the Pocket in the future. But I can certainly tell you what's not going to be the future of FPGA, and that is going to be the Ron Jeremy backed video game trap house known as SuperSEGA FPGA. I'm not putting this segment in just to drag them one more time, even though you know I love calling him Ron Jeremy. I'm putting it in to say that the era of FPGA gaming getting big enough for bad actors like SuperSEGA FPGA to pop up is here. So if you see any new products announced from companies you never heard of before this year, and definitely go in with a pound of reservations, because you never know what's going to happen. As of the recording of this video, over 133,000 euros are missing, and N is Alejandro. So it's one of those things, as FPGA gaming gets bigger, you're going to see stuff like this happen, and while we've had a lot of fun making the videos, ultimately it is a disappointing thing for the FPGA community at large. Now moving over to MikeJ's Replay 2, this is something I really haven't talked about much on the channel, and that has nothing to do with whether or not I believe it's going to be a great product. I think MikeJ is a very competent designer. It's just because he only really posts text, and I don't like making videos that don't have a ton of visuals to go along with them, because I am a filmmaker and visual medium is where I live. But the Replay 2 is a very interesting board, and the specs on this thing are basically like taking a howitzer to a knife fight. It's also using the Agilex 5 from Intel, and you can see here that he just got the license back in June and was able to come off NDA. And again, this is the same chip you're seeing in the DE25 standard from Terasic. So Agilex 5 is probably going to be the new generation of FPGA chips most projects are going to go towards. And when I say the Replay 2 is absolutely insanely spec'd, I 100% mean it. This thing is bringing an FPGA in the full fat design that's going to have over 4 times the logic elements that something like the MiSTer FPGA currently has, and that is going to be some massive overhead. And it seems like MikeJ is planning on both a fat and a light version as well that are going to have slightly different specs. I'm not sure how that fork will affect the overall market, and I will say, as far as the user base is concerned, devs need to come over and support something like this. But you're going to see that Agilex 5 SoC on the Replay 2, as well as this additional board that's going to have ARM cores as well as a GPU. So this could be something like mixed emulation, where you could have some things running on FPGA and some things running on the ARM core or that Mali GPU. It'll be interesting to see. Now moving over to Neptune FPGA, these people are still working on the project. They contacted me maybe just a couple weeks before Christmas and offered to send me a review unit when it was ready to go. And for some strange reason, people have been confusing this with SuperSEGA FPGA, and I can tell you, as far as I can tell, they have absolutely nothing in common whatsoever. The The Neptune FPGA is a real project. They have working prototypes, and they're basically aiming at recreating a 32X and Sega Genesis all in one unit, like Sega was promising us back in the day. It's a Brazilian company, and again, they've shown off this thing running, and we know it is a real board with real cores and real software on them. So it will be fun when and if they send this thing into the channel for review to talk about that as well, because I think you're going to see other companies pop up and start trying to make these recreation consoles with FPGA cores and FPGA chips inside, and the Sega Neptune definitely is something that would be great because the 32X on top of a Sega Genesis looks absolutely ridiculous, and if you have a CDX like me with that mushroom top coming out, it looks absolutely foolish. But it will be interesting to see when this team updates some of their demos and has some more units available for preview, because I am looking forward to taking a look at this thing and telling you guys how it runs. All signs point to this being an optimistic thing so far. They've been showing prototypes, there's been no pre-order process whatsoever, so it's all signs that the thing is good to go. We just have to wait and get a little bit more information. But basically it'll also feature the ability to link up with a Sega CD, so you could kind of make this thing the new Tower of Power in a much smaller footprint, and they're also promising newly developed games on the platform as well, which will be fun to see potentially some new Sega Genesis or 32X games coming out to the market. And I do think in 2025 and beyond, you're going to see more companies jumping into the FPGA gaming series, because everyone has their own idea as to what people might want, and I would say an FPGA Neptune is going to be a fun time when and if it does come out, because it's one of those things for everyone who uses a MiSTer FPGA triple stack. There's consumers out there that just want everything buttoned up in a nice design case where you plug in your controllers, pop in your games, and just go ahead and play them. Because on the MiSTer FPGA side of things, using original media really isn't a priority, where you do have that capability on the analog side, and I know a lot of people do like putting their original cartridges or CDs into an analog system, but leave me a comment down below and you tell me, are you the type of person that wants to play your original media on an FPGA recreation console? Are you happy with the MiSTer FPGA way of doing things, with just loading up files and playing them without the physical media present? Sometimes when I am playing my MiSTer FPGA, I'll put the game next to it just so I can see the cover art, so it kind of feels like I'm using that media just for fun. For me, not being able to play the carts or the discs really doesn't matter, but I know a lot of people are very interested in that, and on the Neptune side of things, being able to put in a Sega Genesis or a 32X cart and play it would be appealing to a lot of people. So don't be surprised in 2025 if you see a few more companies pop up trying to do these recreation consoles as well, because I think it's going to be a very big sales force as far as nostalgia is concerned. People are going to want these under their television, and I totally get that. Now, the last company in this video is Mars FPGA. I wasn't going to mention them because there's no updates whatsoever, but if I don't mention a specific project, people ask me why I excluded it, and I would say it's for no reason other than I had no information. Is the Mars FPGA project still ongoing in development? I have absolutely no idea. I have no information on that. They've been quiet for probably 6 to 8 months or so, and we really haven't seen any new information outside of the fact that they said they were upgrading the FPGA, and Todd Gill of RetroProg fame made some case designs, and I will say Todd is an incredible 3D designer, so hopefully one day maybe this thing does exist and we can see these designs recreated in injection molding plastic. But if you're here to ask me what's going on with Mars FPGA, I don't have the slightest idea, nor does anybody else out there. They could be quietly developing this thing in the background and come out with a near to fully finished prototype soon. It could be something that is completely not being developed anymore. I just really don't know. But again, every time I exclude something from a video, people read some sort of intent into that. So I've included this segment just so no one can actually say that. I do wish the Mars team the best of luck if this thing is still coming out. It is something I would like to see in a review on the channel, and any reason to use more pregnant Arnold Schwarzenegger images in videos, I 100% take it. But that is the future of FPGA gaming in 2025. You have a potential FPGA board that could be a MiSTer 2. Taki Udon and Retro Remake are coming out with new consoles. MikeJ is still developing the Replay 2. Analogue Pocket has the 3D console coming for Nintendo 64, and maybe you might see a refresh of the Pocket. I really hope so. Leave me a comment down below and tell me what's the one thing you want to see in 2025. But I'll see you next time. Bye bye.